Welcome to the art and science of difficult conversations. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lucy, and we love having difficult conversations.
That's right. And each week we'll either share a tip, hear how others have gotten better at difficult conversations, or demonstrate common difficult conversations and what to do and what not to do.
Let's get into it. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Art and Science of Difficult Conversations podcast. Today, I have a very special guest with me, Aries. Thank you so much for saying yes to my invitation to be our guest on the podcast and talking about authenticity and difficult conversations. Aries is not only a friend of mine and a colleague coach, but she's also a former banking executive who is now focusing on coaching and especially leadership coaching. Anything else you would like to add? So thank you really for
Thank you
joining
for
us.
inviting me here. I think my message is always about that authenticity. What does it mean to be authentic as a person, as an individual, as a leader? Especially my work is very centric around leadership coaching, and that's what I'm doing a lot now. And what does that mean? Or what does that mean in terms of your own career development?
When we jump into the topic of difficult conversations and authenticity, what would you say makes difficult conversations difficult based on your experience?
One word came to my, well, two words, different personality. And
Yes.
I think when I just wrote a blog last month, is it last month? Yeah, I think last month, or this month I put into LinkedIn that talks about when you have a different view or personality, then what do you do? And it's kind of having that difficult conversation. And actually it was inspired by a client of mine. So what do I say there? Oh, I say, do you know your authenticity equation? What does that mean? You know, how do you blend your authenticity and do about adapting? Because nobody will be exactly like us. We are all different individuals. And when we are all different, what does that mean to our authenticity? When you are adapting yourself, then again, are you undermining your authenticity? I think so that kind of question kind of go around in your head. How do you balance it all? So you always be having difficult conversation. If somebody does not agree with you, somebody do not see face with you, and then you're trying to put your point across, the person trying to put their points across. I'll give you a simple example. If you have this tendency to speak really fast and you are very passionate and you want to talk a lot, and the person's like, excuse me, can you speak a bit slower? What you said earlier, can you just repeat that again? Can you see the energy different? And what do you do? Well, I mean, I know that it's not so-called a difficult question, but that is part of the difficult question. How do you have a conversation when you two come from a different wavelength? Or maybe make it simple. You two don't agree on the same topic. How do you agree?
So sounds like what makes the difficult conversations difficult is really the differences in personalities, differences in maybe energy levels, differences in opinions and values. I wonder also if cultural differences play a role. I know that originally you are from a different culture than you live right now in. What is your personal journey through difficult conversations? How was your maybe upbringing in your family? What was the approach to difficult conversations? Was it easy to talk about difficult topics, or were some things more taboo and people actually didn't talk much about feelings? What's coming up for you?
In the Asia upbringing, during my time, maybe this generation is different, is you don't really have open conversation with your parents or somebody in authority or your teachers. Is only one-sided. They tell you, you do. What they say, you obey. That's it, done. So is there a difficult conversation? My answer is probably no, because there's no conversation. There's only like, I tell you, you do. That's it. No but. If you're but, you are argumentative. Why are you not doing what I'm saying? So it's quite difficult to think about difficult conversation because there's no conversation.
So if somebody doesn't agree, it's actually really very difficult because in the environment it's actually kind of suppressed. You don't talk, you don't complain, you don't have your own opinion, you just kind of follow the orders
Yeah.
or the
You're
instructions.
not allowed to argue. If you
Mm.
argue, you're outcast. I
Wow.
think I don't want to go into politics, but
Can keep it just in
they are very
questions.
unique. They're unique. No, in fact, because it's our upbringing, we are brought up to obey. So if you don't follow and you don't obey, you are outcast. Of course, there will be people like that.
So how does it
They will
translate in
struggle.
the
They will
work
struggle.
environment?
So in the work environment, it's the same thing. You work, you obey your boss say you do. Right or wrong is a different question. What they say, you do.
So when the boss, let's say, screams at people and behaves in a way that in the
Can't just
Western
the boss scream
countries,
at you. You have to accept the boss scream at you.
what about, let's say, boss is sexually inappropriate with an employee?
God, I don't have that situation. I have female bosses.
Oh.
And my boss scream at me and talk to me like I'm an idiot and can scream across the table and call you, come here. And at 7 p.m., let's have a meeting now because my husband is going to take a bit long to pick me. So let's have a meeting now at 7 o'clock because I'm not ready to go home. Let's have a meeting now. Those who know me will know who I'm saying, but I will not say that. But of course, over the years, the last 30 years, things have changed. These are really old days, old culture. In a more, if you actually, I work in a Western bank. By right, that shouldn't happen. But I happen to have by left, and it happened.
So even in the Western culture, in the UK, now you're living in
No,
the
no.
UK.
I
You
work.
work in the Singapore in the Western bank.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
So you still have the Asian
Culture
culture.
in there. Mm-hmm.
I won't want to talk about. Okay, we'll talk about that if you ask a question.
How would you say it's different, that culture around speaking up, having a conversation in the UK?
Good question. Because of my upbringing, I would say a lot have to do with personality, affecting my confidence. So I don't speak up. Even that you are being shouted at, you are being bullied, you don't speak up. So if you say difficult conversation, it kind of difficult conversation, but you don't really get there because you don't speak up. So you don't have that fight. It doesn't happen because you avoid. It's avoidance, and pleasing and pleasing and pleasing. So I think you know what I'm saying, right? So that is kind of inbuilt. And I hope nobody's like me. But I know there are people who are like me, is avoiding and pleasing. And I don't know whether you have a little volcano in you. And what happened is my volcano will build up and it go volcano do that. So I realized that what happened to me after a number of times, and I realized that it's unhealthy and it's undermining my authenticity. So can I jump ahead and saying that to be authentic, you have to be true to yourself. And to be true to yourself is about respecting who you are, but also respecting others in terms of that authenticity. It's not about, oh, I need to respect myself, I undermine a person. That is not authenticity. That is that is what you call it, narcissistic. You just think about yourself. That's not authenticity. Authenticity is learn about respecting yourself, being true to yourself. And when you're being true and authentic to yourself, you realize that other people need that as well, and you will respect the person. And I come back to the cultural question. Because of my background and upbringing, I struggled a lot when I came to the West. I don't speak up. So of course that is to my disadvantage. And of course I suffered the the not speaking up Yeah.
Sounds like there is a shift though, that really the authenticity, and you tell me if that's accurate, that supports you actually in really looking at, so maybe part of my wiring from the past is not to speak up, but really pausing and reflecting, because you mentioned there were some also consequences to that were unpleasant. Let's say you didn't describe the consequences, but based on your face, I would say these were some unwelcome consequences of actually not speaking up. I assume your needs actually were not met, or people might have been disrespectful and continue doing that if you didn't speak up and set the boundary, which based on your upbringing is completely understandable, because it was a huge punishment for actually even speaking up and setting the boundary. Sounds like very negative consequences. So of course it's natural to kind of self-preserve and continue that kind of self-protective behavior. When you now speak about the authenticity, what happens to, does it change? Is that authentic to stay quiet, or is that authentic to actually speak up even though there is this fear in you? How does it work in you?
Like what I say, authenticity is about being true to yourself. And in that, it's about being true to others. It's about respecting yourself and also respecting others. And that is authenticity. It's not about, oh, you know what? I have a voice. I need to speak. You shut up and you listen to me. No, it's about, I have a voice. I need to speak. But the other person also have a voice and they need to speak. Now, how do I balance up that voice? I need to be true to myself, but doesn't mean that I'm being true to myself. I tell a person to just shut up and you just listened. But the person also need to speak. It's about respect and true. And it's about respecting you, yourself, and the other person.
So it sounds like that really your value for authenticity gives you courage to speak up in situation where in the past you maybe wouldn't have.
Yeah, I forgot to mention one point.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody will resonate. I'm the youngest one. So being the youngest child, you also don't have a voice. So your voice are being suppressed. So I would say because of that upbringing, you go either two way. Either you suppress your voice, of course, there's a detrimental effect, or you overcompensate and you speak too much subsequently as an adult to compensate the voice that you didn't have as a child. So what I like to say is, maybe you guys should look out for my book that I'm writing. Whatever that happened to us as a child will have an impact to us as an adult. And it's to recognize what is that impact it is and come back to knowing who you are. And that who you are have a lot to do with that child. And you have to find back that core self that you probably have forgotten as the older you get. Because we build more and more layer as we get older. Because the society say you better do this, you must do this, you should do this. So we all do that and we forgot that little child true self. So I'm saying that authenticity is going back to the child. And the child is not about, oh, it's all about me, but the child is about let's play together. And the child is about that curiosity. So that's what I'm saying. Does that answer the question?
So sounds like really going to your core and looking at who am I? Instead of I am somebody that, or I should be somebody that my family is telling me how I should behave, what should I say or not say, but really asking, having that curiosity to check with ourselves and to find our inner voice that tells us this is what is authentic to me. And you've mentioned the inner child, and that inner child doesn't mean like shouting everything is about me, but really looking at what is the essence of, how would you describe that to somebody that has never heard the concept of an inner child, how they can find out their own inner voice?
it's actually it's not going to be easy if the person have no concept. It's not going to be a 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 5 minutes conversation, unfortunately. But it just to summarize, it's a little bit like what you say in essence, and is I think okay, I need to say this. What I say is in my book, I have 8 chapters, and 8 chapters is about the journey that you travel to the self, which is uncovering your authenticity, who you are. And the first part I talk about is the childhood. And because I find that as I get older, I forgot what I was like. And I find that it's very difficult to remember what I was like as a child because I didn't really want to remember. So what I'm trying to say is there is the part of that childhood and go back to see that the essence and recognize the goodness from that. And we all have that in us, but we are covered by too many layers we've forgotten. And to come back to that layer, we need to have that awakening to come back. And of course, there's a lot of assessment around psychometric assessment, strength, whatever. They are all useful and they will give you some views, different parts, given assessment to give you different view. But take your time to understand what does that do. Do a lot of reflection, introspection. And then it's a journey. Keep on discovering, uncovering. But through that journey, you need 2 big components. One is that self-love and self-care, self-acceptance. If you don't have that, you will never have the authenticity because we're not perfect. It's very difficult to love yourself because I'm not perfect. I can't do this. I didn't do that. I didn't do this. Oh, God, I just didn't do that. I fear this. I didn't do this. There's a lot of that coming out, self-criticism. So unless you practice self-love, self-compassion, it's very difficult. Another thing that I want to say is courage. Courage of not going out, but courage back to coming in. Because we are in a physical form. Everything we do is in related to a physical form. As in we need to eat well, we need to exercise, whatever. It's all about physical. But we forgot that outside of our physical body, there's also an inner part of us. And they are all in connection. The courage is about not going out, the courage to come back in. So it's quite a journey in itself. And it's not going to be a one stop, there we are. But taking that self-love, self-care, self-acceptance, and having the courage to take your time to come back into yourself. I don't know what it's that.
Yeah, fantastic. So what I'm hearing is really it's not like okay, now I snap my fingers, I have the bigger realization and I know what is my voice and who I am. It's really a self-exploration journey going within. And it could be using all these different assessments, different programs, but really coming back to introspection and discovery journey of our inner inner voice, of our own essence. Sounds like the essence is something good, innately good, that's within us, kind of our strength, our good qualities, and that are ours, that resonate with us, rather than that somebody else taught us the way we should be, sounds like. And that it also gives us courage and how self-love and self-compassion is important on that journey also of sounds like self-acceptance that comes together with the authenticity. When we tie it back to the difficult conversations, sounds like for people that had similar upbringing, or either cultural or in their family, where actually conversation was not encouraged, it was mostly one-sided. Would any specific tip, maybe sharing something if you're comfortable, that helps you to notice, this is the time that usually I would not speak, but in order for me to show respect for myself, this is a time where even though it's uncomfortable for me, I actually need to speak up?
I think you kind of summarized it, right? Even it's uncomfortable conversation, uncomfortable time, I need to speak up. I think is Depends on what kind of situation you are in. Are you at home or are you at work? And what is the objective of the conversation? How critical to or how important is it for you to bring your point across? If it's, I would say, if it's not that important, then do you really need to speak your so-called your point or a view and make a point across and then make everybody unhappy? Or this is a point is important, like especially when you work in the workplace, we may have all a different perspective, and it's important to bring in different angles so people can see that better. So it might kind of rush through that difficult conversation, but eventually it helps. So again, it depends on what is that context.
Would you be comfortable sharing your from personal story or an example of when, let's say in the past, you wouldn't have said anything, but now after the journey, you actually spoke up?
I can't think of anything off my head because the thing is because I'm not in the corporate world anymore. But when I work with clients, I would always ask them and check in is what is so important about this message to them? How does it affect them as an individual? And then they can understand what is that they want to bring across. If it's something that's important to you, and if you don't bring across, it will going to bother you, and you're going to be it's like carrying a bag of heavy sack with you all the time, and you just cannot put it down. Then I say yes, have the conversation, because it's not about I don't respect you, but rather I respect you. That's why I want a conversation with you. But I also need you to know that you need to respect me as well. So I put the sack down. Right? So I think you really need to understand what is that objective of having that conversation and what makes that conversation difficult. Because you have a different perspective, fine, then I need to see your perspective. And when I see your perspective, would that still be a difficult conversation? Maybe that's no longer difficult. The only thing is because I don't difficult conversation basically is that you say A and I say B. And I think B is true. And I'm sticking to what I'm saying. And you say A and you firmly, strongly, honestly, factually believe A is right. So you two will argue to the cow come home and never get any answer. But if I can see your perspective, then that is not a difficult conversation anymore. Like, why, if you can see my perspective, then why? Maybe both perspectives are correct. Or maybe both perspectives are wrong. But the reason we have a difficult conversation is because we don't see each other's perspective. Now, if I can see your perspective, why is that still a difficult conversation? That's the question that I'm going to ask.
So that's how you basically help your clients to also really look at different perspectives. How
Look at it from a
else to look
different
at.
angle and where that different angle come from. Because when we are able to move aside and see from a different perspective, we realize that, now I know why the guy doesn't agree with me. Why the guy have to say this when I have to say that. Now, if I can see that, then it's like, what does that mean?
So before really saying anything, really also putting ourselves into the other person's shoes and showing understanding before we want to be understood, sounds like.
One of the 7 effective habits of Stephen Covey.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you, Aries. Anything else that you would like the listeners to know?
Your conversation brought this thing up to me that I recently put in I actually have a blog written earlier talking about navigating workplace dynamic, and I actually put in a case actually intrigued by the client. It's about she was actually felt her authenticity was being undermined. She was losing about who she is, and I kind of put that up. But I only talk about from a certain angle perspective. And I kind of share it, just thinking about understanding when that is a different, what can you do? So I kind of give some suggestions. So that might be a useful article if they want to look at it.
Thank you so much.
Right?
Yeah, so I definitely can put it into the show notes, a link to that. Also probably link to your LinkedIn. How would you want, if anybody is interested in working with you or knowing more about your work, where to go?
they can definitely find me in LinkedIn, or they can find me from my website. I list all my events there. I run quite different kind of workshop, Eventbrite. So lots of ways you can find me. And if you find my newsletter interesting, my blog interesting, you can always sign up for newsletter, which I send out once a week, where I cover different things. And currently I'm talking about communication.
Fantastic. And you've also mentioned a few times your book, the
Yeah,
chapters.
yeah.
So has it been published already? Did I completely miss
Yeah,
that?
I still have a last chapter to do. So
Okay,
my
so
last chapter is on mindfulness.
so
I'm
book in
doing mindfulness.
progress.
Yes, so I'm finishing the last chapter, and I have to start
Fantastic.
thinking of where to get the manuscript done and then the publishing. But because you asked that, it kind of come to me. Yeah, it sounded like my book, because I'm talking about that journey to authenticity. It's not a destination, but it's a journey in itself. And what I want to say is about recognizing that you are on your journey and embrace your authentic journey.
Love it. I think that deserves the mic drop. Thank you, Aries, for joining us today and for sharing your experiences and perspective.